The whole enterprise is crazy, and it's an absolute scam which is going to cost you a great deal.
It's rather like paying monkeys, because what happens is the civil servants draw up the list, and if it's vote number 58 and the piece of paper says vote yes, you vote yes, and if it's number 59 and it says vote no, you vote no. It is an absolute farce. It is a complete sham masquerading as democracy.
You should not be mistaken. It's very, very strong forces are working towards this federal state.
This is the village of Goudhurst. It's been said that if Kent is the Garden of England, then Goudhurst is the Garden of Kent. The English way of life has gone on here for centuries. But is all that about to become a thing of the past? In 1996, chairman of the British Referendum Party, Sir James Goldsmith, circulated copies of a short film documentary to millions of households across the country. Frustrated by the lack of mainstream press coverage over what he saw as the dismantling of British sovereignty and independence by colluding politicians, Sir James's wake-up call to the people of Great Britain was stark and shocked many.
What you're about to hear will both surprise and outrage you. It's the true story of Europe. It's the story the politicians don't want you to hear, because it shows how they've deceived us and betrayed our nation. Only in 1994 did Chancellor Kohl's foreign policy spokesman, speaking on behalf of the ruling party of Europe's dominant nation, Germany, clearly reveal the true plan. The plan is to create a federal European superstate. Into it will be merged up to 25 ancient European nations, including our own. This new country, called Europe, will have one parliament, one government, one court of justice, one currency, one flag, and one anthem. That has been the plan all along. But those who favored it knew the people of Europe would never accept it. They would never willingly surrender their freedoms to become just a province in a vast European superstate. So what did the politicians do? They conspired to keep the truth from the people.
So what is the truth behind the European Union? Is it, as our politicians keep telling us, Britain's best hope for the future? A chance to regain some of that lost prestige on the world stage by being at the centre of Europe? Today in Britain, all three major political parties miraculously appear to agree at least on one thing. They believe in the destruction of Great Britain as an independent nation. They believe an integrated Europe makes sense, that it is the modern, forward-thinking way to go, that it would prevent any chance of a third European war. Unfortunately, nothing could be further from the truth.
The need to unite Europe grew understandably out of the devastation left behind after two catastrophic world wars. Of all the empires, it was perhaps the Nazis who came closest to pulling off the military conquest and occupation of Europe in recent times. In June 1940, Hermann Göring, Reich Marshal of the German Luftwaffe, reviews final plans for Operation Sea Lion, the German invasion of Great Britain. He also discusses with Hitler a new plan to unite Europe, not just under the conquering hammer of Blitzkrieg, but through a lasting political and economic union, which the Nazis named Europäische Wirtschaftsgemeinschaft, or the European Economic Community. In 1942, a conference is held in Berlin to discuss this political and economic integration of Europe. Of all the nations targeted, Britain has proved the wild card because she alone has successfully resisted invasion. Rising to his feet at the conference, Nazi economist Professor Horst Jecht of Berlin University firmly declares that Britain is the greatest obstacle to Germany fulfilling her historic aim of dominating Europe.
Winston Churchill also believed Britain had an incompatible destiny with that of the continent. Referring to the United Kingdom's reliance on her overseas trade, Churchill stated, "If Britain must choose between Europe and the open sea, we will choose the sea." Both Churchill and Jecht were independently remarking on the same phenomenon Napoleon had noticed 150 years before. That Great Britain was a global trading power, and the nations of Europe weren't.
According to the Nazis, Great Britain's awesome maritime capability was beggaring Europe because it was drawing trade away from the continent. If Britain could be conquered militarily or economically, broken up once and for all as a significant economic and political entity, the spoils of all her trade and wealth would go to whoever ran the new European empire. Few in Berlin were in any doubt about who would do the running. But the tide of war turned against Germany. In 1944, a meeting was held at the Hotel Rotas House in Strasbourg between officials of the Nazi government and German industrialists. The theme of the meeting was, how will Germany dominate the peace when she loses the war?
Following the end of World War II, the rebuilding of Europe, and Germany in particular, became a pressing necessity and was largely funded under the Marshall Plan by the United States. Both Washington and London saw the rapid stabilization of the continent after the war as essential in order to prevent any incursion into Western Europe by the new enemy to be feared, the Soviet Union.
Winston Churchill agreed that some form of Commonwealth of Nations in Europe was desirable for establishing stability and a lasting peace. But he never envisioned Britain as being part of any future United States of Europe.
Winston Churchill's view of Great Britain's relationship with Europe after the Second World War is summarized with these words of his. "But we have our own dream and our own task. We are with Europe, but not of it. We are linked, but not comprised. We are interested and associated, but not absorbed."
The Allied answer to military stability in Europe was to be the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, which came into existence in 1949 as a permanent defense alliance for Europe. The European Union officially began life as the European Coal and Steel Community in 1951, a modest industrial cooperation between France, Germany, Italy, Belgium, Luxembourg and Holland. 6 years later, in 1957, the Treaty of Rome was signed by the 6 participating coal and steel community nations. Declaring its goal as the ever closer union of the peoples of Europe, the Treaty of Rome went far beyond launching just a common market. It established the fledgling apparatus for an idealistic new superpower. This new entity was given an existing and unsettlingly familiar name: the European Economic Community. In 1963, Charles de Gaulle and Konrad Adenauer signed the Treaty of Élysée, signifying the symbolic burying of the hatchet between France and Germany. This was the start of a dynamic new dual leadership role in Europe for the two countries. De Gaulle later resigned, and within a year was dead. Britain was invited to submit yet another application to join the EEC. This time, Edward Heath, now as Britain's Conservative Prime Minister, signed the Treaty of Rome and took Britain into the common market on New Year's Day, 1973. Responding to deep concerns within his own country that joining the EEC would compromise Britain's national sovereignty and independence, Heath sought to reassure the British people in a government white paper. He wrote, "There is no question of Britain losing essential national sovereignty. The master plan, of course, was well known to Edward Heath, Lord Hailsham, and their colleagues in Brussels. It was the eventual creation of a new European superstate out of 25 existing nations in Europe and Scandinavia, and Britain was going to be part of it. From 1973 onwards, the slow but consistent transfer of power from Westminster to Brussels through successive treaties our own politicians signed became known as the acquis communautaire. It was nicknamed the Ratchet, for once powers had been given to Brussels by the member state, they could never be returned.